Hi, I'm David Zuckerman. I'm your Lieutenant Governor, and I'm here today to talk about this summer's campaign, which is that I'm running for Lieutenant Governor again. And as a candidate, I thought I'd talk to you for a few minutes about my background and some of the issues that I care about and what I'm hearing from many Vermonters across the state. First, I was inspired by Bernie back in 1992 when I was a student at University of Vermont, and I saw his incredibly direct method of communicating not only clearly his ideas, but the boldness of ideas with respect to economic inequality, our climate, housing issues, and the general situation for a lot of workers in Vermont who are often struggling. And some of that, sadly, is very true still today, between the high inflation of a few years ago and the challenges of finding good paying jobs in Vermont, but also the real struggle right now, I think, which is on top of many people's minds, is the accessibility of housing, affordable housing, and property taxes. So when I saw Bernie, I became engaged. I volunteered for him, and then actually ran for the legislature. And I served for 18 years, 14 years in the House, including 2 terms as chair of agriculture. I served on the Education Committee in the Senate as well when I served in the Senate for 4 years. I served on the Natural Resources and Energy Committee in the House, and I also served on the Ways and Means Committee in the House. So I've got a lot of experience on different topics facing Vermonters in those ranges of activities. Throughout my time as a legislator, I did a lot of work on affordable housing. I did a lot of work on medical aid and dying, cannabis reform, which many people are familiar with as well, and agricultural opportunities for the diversification of our agricultural system and really expanding that opportunity that many farmers have moved into over these last 20 years as we've seen the local agricultural movement really grow, not only for the small farm businesses, but also for people to get local vine-ripened food that is much more healthy, and we've seen that really thrive throughout Vermont. Right now, the big issues, as I said before, are housing, property taxes, and I would add our climate as well. As a farmer, I've experienced the impacts of our climate. When I was first farming in the Intervale, we were flooding in the spring and in the fall, and it was becoming a little more frequent and a little more severe, and I eventually moved out of the Intervale because of the concerns around the flooding. Now, of course, we've had massive flooding from Hurricane Irene or Tropical Storm Irene, now through to last year's flood of 23. Vermont in the last 10 years has seen an average of 2 emergency declarations at the federal level each year on average, when we used to have 1 every other year in the prior decades. So the climate issue is huge, and that's impacting our housing and our businesses. When you look at downtown Montpelier, Ludlow, Hardwick, Johnson, these issues are happening to Vermonters across the state. With respect to housing, not only is housing getting wiped out in these floods, whether it's mobile home parks or other housing units that are in and near those low-lying areas, but also we're seeing a massive shift as we have climate refugees coming from the southern parts of the United States to Vermont, as we have COVID, quote, refugees coming from the Boston and New York areas, and as we're seeing political refugees, as the political climate in different parts of the country are becoming more challenging. And that's pricing everyday Vermonters right out of the housing market. For me, not only do I think we have a housing shortage, but we have to make sure we invest public dollars to make sure we have affordable housing. There are those that say if we just build more housing, it'll suddenly become affordable. Well, right now the demand is so great relative to the supply that working class people will not be able to compete unless we invest state dollars in the opportunities for working class people to live and work and stay in Vermont. That's one of the reasons I stood for and supported an idea that didn't pass last year, but I hope it'll come up again, which was a marginal tax, which means a top rate tax on those making over $500,000 a year to put towards affordable housing. That would have raised about $70 to $80 million a year to help make housing affordable for everyday Vermonters. We know builders generally build housing to both support the community, but to pay the bills. They're not going to sell the houses for less than it costs to build. That's why we need to invest public dollars to buy down some of that cost and help Vermonters be able to stay. We know the climate is continuing to offer us really challenging weather, in large part because of our actions and overuse of fossil fuels. I've been a longtime supporter of renewable energy, a longtime supporter of state funds being used to support everyday Vermonters being able to pay the bills to convert to longer-term renewable and sustainable energy costs in their homes. We know that fossil fuels are much more volatile than electricity. So if we can help Vermonters pay for fuel and system upgrades to their homes, Vermonters will save money in the long run. But most Vermonters can't afford those upfront costs. So what I bring as a candidate for Lieutenant Governor is not only experience in the job, presiding over the Senate, making sure our democracy functions well, but also ideas to push the envelope for our climate, for our children, and for affordability in Vermont with respect to housing and taxes. And that's the final topic I'll talk about, which is our property taxes. We know that double-digit increases is not sustainable for everyday Vermonters. We also know that the system has actually helped keep small schools and low-value property towns with the ability to have schools in their towns over these last 20 years. But the system needs to be shifted. Right now, wealthier Vermonters actually pay a lower percentage of their income towards education taxes than the 70% of the folks out there that are right now struggling to pay their property taxes. If we simply included wealthier Vermonters in that system of income adjustment, it would actually be a $30 to $40 million savings for everyday Vermonters. We also can look at second homeowners. I firmly believe that those who can afford a second home can afford to pay more to make sure folks can afford to pay a first home or can pay more into our education system. In 1/3 of our towns in Vermont, second homeowners pay a lower property tax rate than people in their residences. That's not right. They should at least be paying the same amount as everybody else so that property taxes don't crush working Vermonters. With that, I thank you for listening. You can always reach out to me. You can find me online, and I appreciate your time and your consideration in the August 13th primary.